where I've gotten caught into a shootout. No, the first time was when I was indoor, and the second time was when I was outside. So what motivates a person to leave their home country and be able to leave for 5 years and potentially leave for the rest of their life? Family and friends. It's one thing if your family and friends is 100% with you, and with family, you have to know too that family is not only your blood relatives, but it's also people who you've known your entire life and they have become family and then completely changed or be someone you don't recognize, and then you realize that hey, these people are not here for you, and that really changes your mentality. I've been living in Canada for 5 years now, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience living in Canada for 5 years. So if you would like to hear what has been my experience traveling to Canada 5 years ago and what has been my experience throughout my 5 years in Canada, definitely keep on watching. So this video is going to be broken down into 4 parts. I'm going to be talking about why I traveled to Canada, the challenges I faced in Canada. 3, I'm going to be talking about push factors and pull factors, and just to give you a brief description, push factors are those reasons that makes you decide that you would like to leave your home country or leave the country that you're currently living in. That's the push factors. And then the pull factors are those reasons why you decide to travel to whatever country you've decided to travel to afterwards. So for me, I traveled from Jamaica. Jamaica is my home country, so there would be where I've experienced push factors, and then pull factors are those reasons why I decided to travel to Canada. And then the 4th thing that I'm going to be talking about is all about what I've learned since I've been living in Canada for 5 entire years, and I'm going to be focusing more on the things that I'm currently using in my everyday life. So first thing first, why did I move to Canada? So first of all, I learned about Canada through word of mouth. Word of mouth was the first way I knew there was a country called Canada. So when I was back in my home country, there were many people who spoke about Canada. They were saying that Canada is an underpopulated country. They were saying that Canada is looking for people, and there are many people who were traveling to Canada at that time. I've also heard that Canada is very cold. I heard that it is a place where people go and when they come back, their life changed. So throughout the years of living in Jamaica, these were things that I continuously heard. And then on top of hearing things about Canada, I also saw a lot. On every notice board in Jamaica, you can literally find a spot where there is a note that says, Canada needs people. Canada needs immigrants. Canada is looking for workers. Like, you have to see at least one of those signs on every single notice board in Jamaica. So just from seeing all of that over the years, it really had Canada at the top of my mind, because I continuously heard about this country. I continuously saw notice board where persons were talking about Canada. So I continuously heard about this place called Canada. Now, having heard so much about Canada, I decided to do my own research. I did a lot of research about Canada, and there was an instance where I had the opportunity to travel to Canada. It was after college, I believe. So after college, I saw on a notice board where they mentioned that there is this summer work where they are employing students who were about to graduate, and they were employing persons from like hospitality. They were employing people who did business, and pretty much a lot of fields they were employing people for back then. That was many years ago, college, about 2015. So in that time, seeing that news, I was very intrigued. When I saw that income, I was intrigued. I was like, wait, what? I don't remember what the exact salary was, but I'm assuming it was about like $18 per hour. And I just did the maths right away. I was like, $18 per hour, how much is that per month that you earn? So the 2 biggest motivation for me to be interested in Canada is that I realized that if I stayed in Jamaica, I would always be in debt. I would always be someone who doesn't have money. I would always be someone who is always chasing my tail, trying to figure out where I'm going to find money to do this, to do that. The reason for that is because income in Jamaica is very low. So because the income there is very low, it causes you to always find it difficult to have money, despite the fact that even if you're in a really good job, you're still not making that much money. Even just doing like a conversion rate between Canada and Jamaica, you would see that the income bracket really differs significantly. When you were to convert both income and expenses, you'll see that it is way more manageable to manage your expenses inside of Canada just by doing some basic maths. Another pull factor for me was the crime and violence. Crime and violence in Jamaica is something that is very prevalent. You always have to be looking over your shoulder. You have to make sure there's no one following you. You have to make sure, you just have to be very vigilant. And being vigilant doesn't mean that you 100% avoid being caught into something. So the crime and violence and poverty is like the main push factors for me as it relates to Jamaica. And then the pull factors were hearing that Canada is a very safe country. I heard that crime and violence in Canada is very low, which was just something that pulled me to Canada. It's like, wow, the issues I have in Jamaica, the two biggest issues I have there, Canada has the opposite experience, and those were the pull factors here. Another biggest thing that I calculated, again, there's a lot of things that I calculate. I sat down and I calculate things like potential incomes and potential expenses for the future. It is just a way for me to analyze what the future would look like with knowing all the facts, because I already know what the prices are going to be for things. Well, things are going to vary, but I already have an idea how much things cost in this current moment, so I can definitely use those costs, use some projections, use the projection of income, and see how affordable life would be in the future. And that is something that I've done in Jamaica. That is something I do here in Canada as well. Just doing those comparisons really got me to realize that I would never have money in Jamaica. I would always be poor. And that is just something that really showed me that I really had to make a change in my life. So those were my reasons for traveling to Canada, and then I successfully traveled in Canada back in 2020. I traveled to Canada as an international student, and then afterwards I became a worker briefly, very briefly, like a couple months. I was a worker in Canada, and that was like, currently it is called a bridging work permit. So that just means in between the time your student status expires and you're waiting for permanent residency, you can apply for a work permit within that time, which is just bridging the gap between the time that your student visa expires and when your permanent residency come through. So within that time, I got a work permit. So I've been through the process of having a study permit, being a worker in Canada, being a student in Canada, and also being a permanent resident in Canada. Now, I'm just going to go straight into it and let you know that as an international student in Canada versus being a permanent resident in Canada, I personally haven't experienced any significant differences. It still feels a lot the same. I've been a permanent resident for 1 year, and I was a student for 3.5 years, and I was a worker for half a year. So with that in mind, I don't see any significant difference. If you come as an international student, you're still living in Canada and you still have to deal with all the issues surrounding Canada. You can still work in Canada as a student. You can work for 24 hours, and then after, as a worker, you're working again, and then as a permanent resident, you're still working. So it still feels the same because you're doing the same things. However, as a permanent resident, you have the opportunity to do more things. You get access to benefits that you didn't have access to before, but you also need to be eligible for those benefits. So for me, I'm currently not even eligible for any of the benefits that you would get because of just my personal situation. But there are many benefits in Canada. I would say the only benefit, come to think of it, one benefit I would think would be health insurance, but at the same time I would also get that as an international student. Childcare is also a benefit that is available as an international student. I think you have to be in Canada for 1 year first, and then even as an international student you would be eligible. So coming to Canada as an international student is actually a plus. Like, there's nothing wrong with coming as an international student. You still get a lot of the benefits that are available for Canadian citizens and permanent residents. So year one of living in Canada. So I moved to Canada back in 2020, and when I first moved there, the biggest challenge I faced was finding a job here. Now, for most people, you tend to feel secure when you're in a job. If you're not in a job, you don't feel secure. And that was my way of thinking. I did not feel secure not having a job into a country that I've never been in. Now, I expected that traveling to Canada won't be smooth sailing. I'm traveling to a brand new country. I'm moving to this I'm going to have to deal with new things that I've never experienced before, like the weather, winter, and things like that. So I knew that it would be challenging, but at the same time I didn't see it in such a way where it would be that bad until I was looking for a job. I looked for a job for 4 months, and it felt like I was searching for a job for 4 years. That is how it really feel, though I was only looking for 4 years. And looking back, though I was only looking for 4 months, and looking back now, after 5 years later, looking back, I would say looking for a job for 4 months was actually good, but my expectations were very wrong. So my expectation was that I would have gotten a job like right away. Like, there were many people online saying that once you travel to Canada, you're going to get a job very quickly. It's very easy to get a job. You just walk into somewhere that say help wanted and you get a job. And while that is true for some people, it's not true for everybody. And that is why I try to do these videos where I share a lot about my experiences, so that you know that there are challenges out there and there are people who find it difficult to find a job. And yes, there are people who travel here, see a help wanted, go in there and get a job right away, but that is not the case for everybody. This video is part of a 3-part series, so you just watch part 1 where I spoke about my life before I traveled to Canada. Part 2 is going to be about my life living in Canada for 5 years, and then part 3 is going to be what I've learned since I've been living in Canada, but I'm going to be focusing on the things that I'm currently using in my everyday life. So if that interests you, or you just want more content about life in Canada and Canadian immigration, you can always subscribe to my channel for more of that, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.